They got money for war, but can't feed the poor. In a world grappling with the aftermath of numerous wars and conflicts, there is a contentious debate about how governments allocate funds. Throughout history, we have seen vast resources poured into wars, weapons, and military expenditures, leaving some to question the ethics of such decisions. Meanwhile, the issue of poverty and hunger remains a daunting challenge, with millions suffering the consequences of limited access to basic necessities.
According to a new study by the Center for American Progress, it found 61% of Americans say their family's income falls below the cost of living.
Why do governments prioritize warfare over addressing societal needs? What are the implications of these choices on human lives and global stability? We delve into the historical context of past wars and analyze the shocking disparities in spending between military budgets and poverty alleviation efforts. Drawing upon historical records, we expose the vast sums allocated to armaments, defense technologies, and war machinery. Through personal narratives and historical records, we uncover the stories of those who have been left behind, struggling for survival in the shadow of war expenditures. The historical backdrop of prior conflicts and the spending differences between military budgets and initiatives to combat poverty.
Conflicts happen, they affect the economies of many other countries. It will weigh on economic growth, add to stresses on public finances, and potentially even add to risks of social unrest.
The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. During the American Civil War, the United States witnessed a staggering financial commitment to warfare. The total cost of the American Civil War is estimated to be around $6.2 billion. The war's expenses included various factors, such as military operations, troop salaries, weapons and equipment, medical care for wounded soldiers, and infrastructure repair and construction, among others. However, as the conflict raged on, millions of civilians endured poverty, hunger, and destitution. The question arises, could these vast sums have been better allocated to address poverty and rebuild the war-torn nation? World War II, 1939 to 1945. World War II saw unprecedented military spending by major powers, draining their economies and resources. The United States spent around $4 trillion in today's dollars during World War II. The UK's war expenses were also substantial, totaling around $120 billion in today's currency. The Soviet Union, being heavily affected by the war, spent an estimated $3.3 trillion in today's dollars. Germany's war expenditures were approximately $1.2 trillion in today's currency. Japan's expenses for the war were around $60 billion in today's dollars. While soldiers fought on distant battlefields, families back home struggled to make ends meet, often falling into poverty. The Cold War, 1947 to 1991. The Cold War era was characterized by intense arms races and military buildups between superpowers. Enormous budgets were allocated to nuclear weapons and defense, leaving little room for poverty alleviation programs. This excessive military spending contributed to the perpetuation of poverty and hindered social progress. In the aftermath of wars, societies often find themselves grappling with the devastating consequences of conflict. One of the most significant challenges they faced is the widespread poverty that engulfs communities and individuals alike. The history of military spending reveals a recurrent pattern of societies allocating vast resources to warfare and defense. The drive for power, territorial expansion, ideological conflicts, and modern threats have consistently pushed nations to spend heavily on their militaries.
The government spends $300 billion on the military and cuts back on programs for the cities and towns.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions.
Why is it necessary to continue to spend almost $300 billion a year on the military?
While military spending has sometimes led to technological advancements and innovation, it has also come at the cost of diverting resources from essential social programs and economic development. As we move forward, it remains crucial to strike a balance between national security and the well-being of citizens. Wars and conflicts inflict immeasurable human suffering, with millions of lives lost or forever altered. The resources spent on military endeavors could have been used to improve healthcare, education, and infrastructure, enhancing the overall well-being of citizens. This problem shows how our leaders' priorities are skewed and raises questions about how resources are allocated. The inability to feed the hungry serves as a stark reminder of how unequal and unfair our societies are despite the wealth and power of the world's nations. It is time to address this problem and call for a more efficient distribution of funds to end poverty. Martin Luther King Jr., he stated in his speech Beyond Vietnam that a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. In the United States, the defense budget is frequently much larger than the funds allocated for social welfare programs, which starkly illustrates government priorities. In 2021, for instance, the United States approved a $740 billion defense budget, while funding for programs designed to alleviate poverty and feed the impoverished fell short. This disparity calls into question the government's commitment to addressing societal requirements and the allocation of resources. Moreover, even in nations where the defense budget is more reasonable than in the United States, there are instances in which the requirements of people with low incomes should be addressed. Consider India as an example. The country has one of the world's most enormous defense budgets, but many of its population live in poverty and hunger. This disparity between military expenditure and efforts to alleviate poverty reflects misplaced priorities. Bernie Sanders, the U.S. Senator from Vermont, has consistently criticized excessive military spending and advocated for more significant investment in social programs. He has often stated that the wealth of the wealthiest people and corporations could be used to address poverty and inequality. One of the most devastating effects of prioritizing war over the needs of the poor is the worsening of poverty and hunger. Although military operations receive billions of dollars, funding for crucial resources to fight poverty is still insufficient. Vulnerable communities are deprived of the means to improve their living conditions because programs to fight poverty receive insufficient funding. Ample access to nutrient-rich food becomes a luxury as food assistance programs struggle to keep up with the rising demand. People are caught in an unbreakable cycle of poverty due to hunger and malnutrition. Additionally, funding for military projects is diverted from areas that could have been used for education and job creation. In order to escape poverty, the poor are thus prevented from obtaining a quality education and finding employment. As a result of a lack of resources, they are unable to improve their situation and are instead enmeshed in a never-ending cycle of poverty. Governments' claims to prioritize citizen security and safety while ignoring the basic needs of the most vulnerable citizens is tragic irony. A powerful reminder of this contradiction is provided by the phrase, "but can't feed the poor." Through these stories and analyses, we aim to shed light on the urgent need for rethinking our approach to national budgets and advocating for more responsible and ethical spending practices. We can only hope to build a more equitable society where no one ever has to say, "but we can't feed the poor."